Chapter 19, The Lady Rages. Dora Grayling stood in the doorway. "I told your servant he need not trouble to show me in, and I've come without my aunt. I hope I'm not intruding." She was, confoundedly, and it was on the tip of my tongue to tell her so. She came into the room with twinkling eyes, looking radiantly happy, that sort of look which makes even a plain young woman prepossessing. Am I intruding? I believe I am. She held out her hand while she was still a dozen feet away, and when I did not at once dash forward to make a clutch at it, she shook her head and made a little mouth at me. "What's the matter with you? Aren't you well?" I was not well. I was very far from well. I was as unwell as I could be without being positively ill, and any person of common discernment would have perceived it at a glance. At the same time, I was not going to admit anything of the kind to her. "Thank you. I am perfectly well." Then, if I were you, I would endeavor to become imperfectly well. A little imperfection in that direction might make you appear to more advantage. I am afraid that I am not one of those persons who ever do appear to much advantage. Did I not tell you so last night? I believe you did say something of the kind. It's very good of you to remember. Have you forgotten something else which you said to me last night? You can hardly expect me to keep fresh in my memory all the follies of which my tongue is guilty. Thank you. That is quite enough. Good day. She turned as if to go. "Miss Grayling." "Mr. Atherton? What's the matter? What have I been saying now?" "Last night you invited me to come and see you this morning. Is that one of the follies of which your tongue was guilty?" The engagement had escaped my recollection. It is a fact, and my face betrayed me. "You had forgotten?" Her cheeks flamed, her eyes sparkled. You must pardon my stupidity for not having understood that the invitation was of that general kind which is never meant to be acted on. She was halfway to the door before I stopped her. I had to take her by the shoulder to do it. "Miss Grayling, you are hard on me." "I suppose I am. Is anything harder than to be intruded on by an undesired and unexpected guest? Now you are harder still. If you knew what I have gone through since our conversation of last night, in your strength you would be merciful." "Indeed? What have you gone through?" I hesitated. What I actually had gone through, I certainly did not propose to tell her. Other reasons apart, I did not desire to seem madder than I admittedly am, and I lacked sufficient plausibility to enable me to concoct, on the spur of the moment, a plain tale of the doings of my midnight visitor, which would have suggested that the narrator was perfectly sane. So I fenced, or tried to. For one thing, I have had no sleep. I had not one single wink. When I did get between the sheets, all night I lay in agony. I suffered from that worst form of nightmare, the nightmare of the man who is wide awake. There was continually before my fevered eyes the strange figure of that nameless thing. I had often smiled at tales of haunted folk. Here was I, one of them. My feelings were not rendered more agreeable by a strengthening conviction that if I had only retained the normal attitude of a scientific observer, I should, in all probability, have solved the mystery of my Oriental friend, and that his example of the genus of Copridae might have been pinned by a very large pin on a monstrous piece of cork. It was galling to reflect that he and I had played together a game of bluff, a game at which civilization was once more proved to be a failure. She could not have seen all this in my face, but she saw something because her own look softened. "You do look tired." She seemed to be casting about in her own mind for a cause. "You have been worrying." She glanced round the big laboratory. "Have you been spending the night in this wizard's cave?" "Pretty well." "Oh." The monosyllable, as she uttered it, was big with meaning. Uninvited, she seated herself in an armchair, a huge old thing of shag-green leather which would have held half a dozen of her. Demure in it she looked, like an agreeable reminiscence, alive and a little up-to-date, of the women of long ago. Her dove-gray eyes seemed to perceive so much more than they cared to show. "How is it that you have forgotten that you asked me to come? Didn't you mean it?" "Of course I meant it." "Then how is it you've forgotten?" "I didn't forget." "Don't tell fibs. Something is the matter. Tell me what it is. Is it that I am too early?" "Nothing of the sort. You couldn't be too early." "Thank you. When you pay a compliment, even so neat and one as that, sometimes you should look as if you meant it. It is early, I know it's early, but afterwards I want you to come to lunch. I told Aunt that I would bring you back with me. You are much better to me than I deserve." "Perhaps?" A tone came into her voice which was almost pathetic. "I think that to some men women are almost better than they deserve. I don't know why. I suppose it pleases them. It is odd." There was a different intonation, a dryness. "Have you forgotten what I came for?" "Not a bit of it. I am not quite the brute I seem. You came to see an illustration of that pleasant little fancy of mine for slaughtering my fellows. The fact is, I'm hardly in a mood for that just now. I've been illustrating it too much already." "What do you mean?" "Well, for one thing, it's been murdering Lessingham's cat." "Mr. Lessingham's cat?" "Then it almost murdered Percy Woodville." "Mr. Atherton, I wish you wouldn't talk like that." "It's a fact. It was a question of a little matter in a wrong place, and if it hadn't been for something very like a miracle, he'd be dead. I wish you wouldn't have anything to do with such things. I hate them." I stared. "Hate them? I thought you'd come to see an illustration. And pray, what was your notion of an illustration?" "Well, another cat would have had to be killed, at least." "And do you suppose that I would have sat still while a cat was being killed for my edification?" "It needn't necessarily have been a cat, but something would have had to be killed. How are you going to illustrate the death-dealing propensities of a weapon of that sort without it? Is it possible that you imagine that I came here to see something killed? Then for what did you come?" I do not know what there was about the question which was startling, but as soon as it was out, she went a fiery red. "Because I was a fool." I was bewildered. Either she had got out of the wrong side of bed, or I had, or we both had. Here she was, assailing me, hammer and tongs, so far as I could see, for absolutely nothing. "You are pleased to be satirical at my expense." "I should not dare. Your detection of me would be so painfully rapid." I was in no mood for jangling. I turned a little away from her. Immediately she was at my elbow. "Mr. Atherton." "Miss Grayling, are you cross with me?" "Why should I be? If it pleases you to laugh at my stupidity, you are completely justified. But you are not stupid." "No, nor you satirical." "You are not stupid. You know you are not stupid. It was only stupidity on my part to pretend that you were. It is very good of you to say so, but I fear that I am an indifferent host. Although you would not care for an illustration, there may be other things which you might find amusing." "Why do you keep on snubbing me?" "I keep on snubbing you." "You are always snubbing me. You know you are. Sometimes I feel as if I hated you." "Miss Grayling." I do. After all, it is only natural. That is how you talk, as if I were a child and you were, oh, I don't know what." "Well, Mr. Atherton, I am sorry to be obliged to leave you. I have enjoyed my visit very much. I only hope I have not seemed too intrusive." She flounced. Flounce was the only appropriate word. Out of the room before I could stop her. I caught her in the passage. "Miss Grayling, I entreat you." "Pray do not entreat me, Mr. Atherton." Standing still, she turned to me. "I would rather show myself to the door as I showed myself in, but if that is impossible, might I ask you not to speak to me between this and the street?" The hint was broad enough even for me. I escorted her through the hall without a word. In perfect silence she shook the dust of my abode from off her feet. I had made a pretty mess of things. I felt it as I stood on the top of the steps and watched her going. She was walking off at 4 miles an hour. I had not even ventured to ask to be allowed to call a hansom. It was beginning to occur to me that this was a case in which another blow upon the river might be, to say the least of it, advisable, and I was just returning into the house with the intention of putting myself into my flannels when a cab drew up, and old Linden got out of it. Chapter 20. A Heavy Father. Mr. Linden was excited. There is no mistaking it when he is, because with him excitement means perspiration, and as soon as he was out of the cab he took off his hat and began to wipe the lining. "Atherton, I want to speak to you, most particularly, somewhere in private." I took him into my laboratory. It is my rule to take no one there. It is a workshop, not a playroom. The place is private. But recently my rules had become dead letters. Directly he was inside, Linden began puffing and stewing, wiping his forehead, throwing out his chest, as if he were oppressed by a sense of his own importance. Then he started off talking at the top of his voice, and it is not a low one either. "Atherton, I've always looked on you as a kind of a son." "That's very kind of you." "I've always regarded you as a level-headed fellow, a man from whom sound advice can be obtained when sound advice is most to be desired. That also is very kind of you, and therefore I make no apology for coming to you at what may be regarded as a strictly domestic crisis, at a moment in the history of the Lindens when delicacy and common sense are essentially required." This time I contented myself with nodding. Already I perceived what was coming. Somehow, when I am with a man I feel so much more clear-headed than I do when I am with a woman, realize so much better the nature of the ground on which I am standing. "What do you know of this man, Lessingham?" I knew it was coming. What all the world knows. And what does all the world know of him? I ask you that. A flashy, plausible, shallow-pated carpetbagger, that is what all the world knows of him. The man's a political adventurer. He snatches a precarious and criminal notoriety by trading on the follies of his fellow countrymen. He is devoid of decency, destitute of principle, and impervious to all the feelings of a gentleman. What do you know of him besides this? I am not prepared to admit that I do know that. Oh, yes, you do. Don't talk nonsense. You choose to screen the fellow. I say what I mean. I always have said, and I always shall say. What do you know of him outside politics, of his family, of his private life? Well, not very much. Of course you don't, nor does anybody else. The man's a mushroom, or a toadstool, rather, sprung up in the course of a single night, apparently out of some dirty ditch. Why, sir, not only is he without ordinary intelligence, he is even without a Brummagem substitute for manners. He had worked himself into a state of heat in which his countenance presented a not too agreeable assortment of scarlets and purples. He flung himself into a chair, threw his coat wide open, and his arms too, and started off again. The family of the Lindens is, at this moment, represented by a young woman, by my daughter, sir. She represents me, and it's her duty to represent me adequately. Adequately, sir? And what's more, between ourselves, sir, it's her duty to marry. My property's my own, and I wouldn't have it passed to either of my confounded brothers on any account. They're next door to fools, and they don't represent me in any possible sense of the word. My daughter, sir, can marry whom she pleases, whom she pleases. There's no one in England, peer or commoner, who would not esteem it an honor to have her for his wife. I've told her so. Yes, sir, I've told her, though you'd think that she, of all people in the world, wouldn't require telling. Yet what do you think she does? She actually carries on what I can't help calling a compromising acquaintance with this man Lessingham. No, but I say yes, and I wish to heaven I didn't. I've warned her against the scoundrel more than once. I've told her to cut him dead. And yet, as you saw yourself, last night, in the face of the assembled House of Commons, after that twaddling claptrap speech of his, in which there was not one sound sentiment, nor an idea which would hold water, she positively went away with him, in the most ostentatious and disgraceful fashion, on his arm, and actually snubbed her father. It is monstrous that a parent, a father, should be subjected to such treatment by his child. The poor old boy polished his brow with his pocket handkerchief. When I got home, I told her what I thought of her. I promise you that, and I told her what I thought of him. I didn't mince my words with her. There are occasions when plain speaking is demanded, and that was one. I positively forbade her to speak to the fellow again, or to recognize him if she met him in the street. I pointed out to her, with perfect candor, that the fellow was an infernal scoundrel, that and nothing else, and that he would bring disgrace on whoever came into contact with him, even with the end of a barge pole. And what do you think she said? She promised to obey you, I make no doubt. Did she, sir? By gad, did she? That shows how much you know her, she said, and by gad, by her manner and the way she went on, you'd have thought that she was the parent and I was the child. She said that I grieved her, that she was disappointed in me, that times have changed. Yes, sir, she said that times have changed. That nowadays parents weren't Russian autocrats. No, sir, not Russian autocrats. That she was sorry she couldn't oblige me. Yes, sir. That was how she put it. She was sorry she couldn't oblige me, but it was altogether out of the question to suppose that she could put a period to a friendship which she valued simply on account of my unreasonable prejudices, and in short, she told me to go the devil, sir. And did you? I was on the point of asking him if he went, but I checked myself in time. Let us look at the matter as men of the world. What do you know against Lessingham apart from his politics? That's just it. I know nothing. In a sense, isn't that in his favor? I don't see how you make that out. I don't mind telling you that I've had inquiries made. He's not been in the House 6 years. This is his second Parliament. He's jumped up like a jack-in-the-box. His first constituency was Harwich. They've got him still, and much good may he do 'em. But how he came to stand for the place, or who, or what, or where he was before he stood for the place, no one seems to have the faintest notion. Hasn't he been a great traveler? I never heard of it. Not in the East? Has he told you so? No, I was only wondering. Well, it seems to me that to find out that nothing is known against him is something in his favor. My dear Sidney, don't talk nonsense. What it proves is simply that he's a nothing and a nobody. Had he been anything or anyone, something would have been known about him, either for or against. I don't want my daughter to marry a man who's shot up through a trap simply because nothing is known against him. Ha! Hang me, if I wouldn't 10 times sooner she should marry you. When he said that, my heart leaped in my bosom. I had to turn away. I am afraid that is out of the question. He stopped in his tramping and looked at me askance. Why? I felt that if I was not careful, I should be done for, and, probably, in his present mood, Marjorie too. My dear Lyndon, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to you for your suggestion, but I can only repeat that, unfortunately, anything of the kind is out of the question. I don't see why. Perhaps not. You're a pretty lot, upon my word. I'm afraid we are. I want you to tell her that Lessingham is a damned scoundrel. I see, but I would suggest that if I am to use the influence with which you credit me to the best advantage, or to preserve a shred of it, I had hardly better state the fact quite so bluntly as that. I don't care how you state it as you like. Only I want you to soak her mind with a loathing of the fellow. I want you to paint him in his true colors. In fact, I want you to choke him off." While he still struggled with his words, and with the perspiration on his brow, Edwards entered. I turned to him. "What is it?" "Miss Linden, sir, wishes to see you particularly, and at once." At that moment I found the announcement a trifle perplexing. It delighted Linden. He began to stutter and to stammer. "T, the very thing. C couldn't have been better. Show her in here. H, hide me somewhere, I don't care where, behind that screen. You use your influence with her. Give her a good talking to. Tell her what I've told you, and at the critical moment I'll come in, and then if we can't manage her between us, it'll be a wonder." The proposition staggered me. "But, my dear Mr. Linden, I fear that I cannot." He cut me short. "Here she comes." Ere I could stop him, he was behind the screen. I had not seen him move with such agility before, and before I could expostulate, Marjorie was in the room. Something which was in her bearing, in her face, in her eyes, quickened the beating of my pulses. She looked as if something had come into her life and taken the joy clean out of it. Chapter 21. The Terror in the Night. "Sidney," she cried, "I'm so glad that I can see you." She might be, but at that moment I could scarcely assert that I was a sharer of her joy. "I told you that if trouble overtook me, I should come to you, and I'm in trouble now, such strange trouble." So was I, and in perplexity as well. An idea occurred to me. I would outwit her eavesdropping father. "Come with me into the house. Tell me all about it there." She refused to budge. "No, I will tell you all about it here." She looked about her, as it struck me queerly. This is just the sort of place in which to unfold a tale like mine. It looks uncanny, but me no buts. "Sidney, don't torture me. Let me stop here where I am. Don't you see I'm haunted?" She had seated herself. Now she stood up, holding her hands out in front of her in a state of extraordinary agitation, her manner as wild as her words. "Why are you staring at me like that? Do you think I'm mad? I wonder if I'm going mad. Sidney, do people suddenly go mad? You're a bit of everything. You're a bit of a doctor, too. Feel my pulse. There it is. Tell me if I'm ill." I felt her pulse. It did not need its swift beating to inform me that fever of some sort was in her veins. I gave her something in a glass. She held it up to the level of her eyes. "What's this?" "It's a decoction of my own. You might not think it, but my brain sometimes gets into a whirl. I use it as a sedative. It will do you good." She drained the glass. "It's done me good already. I believe it has. That's being something like a doctor." "Well, Sidney, the storm has almost burst. Last night Papa forbade me to speak to Paul Lessingham by way of a prelude." "Exactly, Mr. Linden." "Yes, Mr. Linden, that's Papa. I fancy we almost quarreled. I know Papa said some surprising things, but it's a way he has. He's apt to say surprising things. He's the best father in the world, but it's not in his nature to like a really clever person. Your good, high-dried old Tory never can. I've always thought that that's why he's so fond of you." "Thank you. I presume that is the reason, though it had not occurred to me before. Since her entry, I had, to the best of my ability, been turning the position over in my mind. I came to the conclusion that, all things considered, her father had probably as much right to be a sharer of his daughter's confidence as I had, even from the vantage of the screen, and that for him to hear a few home truths proceeding from her lips might serve to clear the air. From such a clearance, the lady would not be likely to come off worst. I had not the faintest inkling of what was the actual purport of her visit. She started off, as it seemed to me, at a tangent. "Did I tell you last night about what took place yesterday morning, about the adventure of my finding the man?" "Not a word." "I believe I meant to. I'm half disposed to think he's brought me trouble. Isn't there some superstition about evil befalling whoever shelters a homeless stranger?" We'll hope not, for humanity's sake. I fancy there is. I feel sure there is. Anyhow, listen to my story. Yesterday morning, before breakfast, to be accurate, between 8 and 9, I looked out of the window and I saw a crowd in the street. I sent Peter out to see what was the matter. He came back and said there was a man in a fit. I went out to look at the man in the fit. I found, lying on the ground in the center of the crowd, a man who, but for the tattered remnants of what had apparently once been a cloak, would have been stark naked. He was covered with dust and dirt and blood, a dreadful sight. As you know, I have had my smattering of instruction in first aid to the injured and that kind of thing, so as no one else seemed to have any sense and the man seemed as good as dead, I thought I would try my hand. Directly I knelt down beside him. What do you think he said? Thank you. Nonsense, he said in such a queer, hollow, croaking voice. Paul Lessingham. I was dreadfully startled to hear a perfect stranger, a man in his condition, utter that name in such a fashion, to me, of all people in the world, took me aback. The policeman who was holding his head remarked, "That's the first time he's opened his mouth. I thought he was dead." He opened his mouth a second time. A convulsive movement went all over him, and he exclaimed, with the strangest earnestness, and so loudly that you might have heard him at the other end of the street, "Be warned, Paul Lessingham, be warned." It was very silly of me, perhaps, but I cannot tell you how his words and his manner, the two together, affected me. Well, the long and the short of it was that I had him taken into the house and washed and put to bed, and I had the doctor sent for. The doctor could make nothing of it at all. He reported that the man seemed to be suffering from some sort of cataleptic seizure. I could see that he thought it likely to turn out almost as interesting a case as I did. "Did you acquaint your father with the addition to his household?" She looked at me quizzically. You see, when one has such a father as mine, one cannot tell him everything at once. There are occasions on which one requires time. I felt that this would be wholesome hearing for old Linden. Last night, after Papa and I had exchanged our little courtesies, which, it is to be hoped, were to Papa's satisfaction, since they were not to be mine, I went to see the patient. I was told that he had neither eaten, nor drunk, moved, nor spoken, but so soon as I approached his bed, he showed signs of agitation. He half raised himself upon his pillow, and he called out, as if he had been addressing some large assembly. I can't describe to you the dreadful something which was in his voice and on his face. "Paul Lessingham, beware, the Beetle." When she said that, I was startled. Are you sure those were the words he used? Quite sure. Do you think I could mistake them, especially after what has happened since? I hear them singing in my ears. They haunt me all the time. She put her hands up to her face, as if to veil something from her eyes. I was becoming more and more convinced that there was something about the apostle's connection with his Oriental friend which needed probing to the bottom. What sort of a man is he to look at, this patient of yours? I had my doubts as to the gentleman's identity, which her words dissolved, only, however, to increase my mystification in another direction. He seems to be between 30 and 40. He has light hair and straggling sandy whiskers. He is so thin as to be nothing but skin and bone. The doctor says it's a case of starvation. You say he has light hair and sandy whiskers. Are you sure the whiskers are real? She opened her eyes. Of course they're real. Why shouldn't they be real? Does he strike you as being a foreigner? Certainly not. He looks like an Englishman, and he speaks like one, and not, I should say, of the lowest class. It is true that there is a very curious, a weird quality in his voice, what I have heard of it, but it is not un-English. If it is catalepsy he is suffering from, then it is a kind of catalepsy I never heard of. Have you ever seen a clairvoyant? I nodded. He seems to me to be in a state of clairvoyance. Of course, the doctor laughed when I told him so, but we know what doctors are, and I still believe that he is in some condition of the kind. When he said that last night, he struck me as being under what those sort of people call influence, and that whoever had him under influence was forcing him to speak against his will. for the words came from his lips as if they had been wrung from him in agony. Knowing what I did know, that struck me as being rather a remarkable conclusion for her to have reached by the exercise of her own unaided powers of intuition, but I did not choose to let her know I thought so. My dear Marjorie, you who pride yourself on having your imagination so strictly under control, on suffering it to take no errant flights, is not the fact that I do so, pride myself proof that I am not likely to make assertions wildly, proof, at any rate, to you? Listen to me. When I left that unfortunate creature's room, I had had a nurse sent for, I left him in her charge, and reached my own bedroom. I was possessed by a profound conviction that some appalling, intangible, but very real danger was at that moment threatening Paul. Remember, you had had an exciting evening, and a discussion with your father. Your patient's words came as a climax. That is what I told myself, or, rather, that was what I tried to tell myself, because, in some extraordinary fashion, I had lost the command of my powers of reflection. Precisely. It was not precisely, or at least, it was not precisely in the sense you mean. You may laugh at me, Sidney, but I had an altogether indescribable feeling, a feeling which amounted to knowledge, that I was in the presence of the supernatural. Nonsense. It was not nonsense. I wish it had been nonsense. As I have said, I was conscious, completely conscious, that some frightful peril was assailing Paul. I did not know what it was, but I did know that it was something altogether awful, of which merely to think was to shudder. I wanted to go to his assistance. I tried to, more than once, but I couldn't, and I knew that I couldn't. I knew that I couldn't move as much as a finger to help him. Stop, let me finish. I told myself that it was absurd, but it wouldn't do. Absurd or not, there was the terror with me in the room. I knelt down and I prayed, but the words wouldn't come. I tried to ask God to remove this burden from my brain, but my longings wouldn't shape themselves into words, and my tongue was palsied. I don't know how long I struggled, but at last I came to understand that, for some cause, God had chosen to leave me to fight the fight alone. So I got up and undressed and went to bed, and that was the worst of all. I had sent my maid away in the first rush of my terror, afraid and, I think, ashamed to let her see my fear. Now I would have given anything to summon her back again, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't even ring the bell. So, as I say, I got into bed. She paused, as if to collect her thoughts. To listen to her words and to think of the suffering which they meant to her was almost more than I could endure. I would have thrown away the world to have been able to take her in my arms and soothe her fears. I knew her to be, in general, the least hysterical of young women, little wont to become the prey of mere delusions, and, incredible though it sounded, I had an innate conviction that, even in its wildest periods, her story had some sort of basis in solid fact. What that basis amounted to, it would be my business, at any and every cost, quickly to determine. You know how you have always laughed at me because of my objection to cockroaches, and how, in spring, the neighborhood of Maybugs has always made me uneasy. As soon as I got into bed, I felt that something of the kind was in the room. Something of what kind? Some kind of beetle. I could hear the whirring of its wings. I could hear its droning in the air. I knew that it was hovering above my head, that it was coming lower and lower, nearer and nearer. I hid myself. I covered myself all over with the clothes. Then I felt it bumping against the coverlet. And, Sidney! She drew closer. Her blanched cheeks and frightened eyes made my heart bleed. Her voice became but an echo of itself. It followed me. Marjorie, it got into the bed. You imagined it. I didn't imagine it. I heard it crawl along the sheets till it found a way between them, and then it crawled towards me, and I felt it against my face. And it's there now. Where? She raised the forefinger of her left hand. There. Can't you hear it droning? She listened intently. I listened too. Oddly enough, at that instant, the droning of an insect did become audible. It's only a bee, child, which has found its way through the open window. I wish it were only a bee. I wish it were. Sydney, don't you feel as if you were in the presence of evil? Don't you want to get away from it, back into the presence of God? Marjorie, pray, Sydney, pray. I can't. I don't know why, but I can't. She flung her arms about my neck and pressed herself against me in paroxysmal agitation. The violence of her emotion bade fair to unman me too. It was so unlike Marjorie, and I would have given my life to save her from a toothache. She kept repeating her own words, as if she could not help it. Pray, Sydney, pray. At last I did as she wished me. At least there is no harm in praying. I never heard of its bringing hurt to anyone. I repeated aloud the Lord's Prayer, the first time for I know not how long. As the divine sentences came from my lips, hesitatingly enough, I make no doubt, her tremors ceased. She became calmer. Until, as I reached the last great petition, deliver us from evil, she loosed her arms from about my neck and dropped upon her knees, close to my feet, and she joined me in the closing words as a sort of chorus. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. When the prayer was ended, we both of us were still. She, with her head bowed and her hands clasped, and I with something tugging at my heart, strings which I had not felt there for many and many a year, almost as if it had been my mother's hand. I dare say that sometimes she does stretch out her hand from her place among the angels to touch my heartstrings, and I know nothing of it all the while. As the silence still continued, I chanced to glance up, and there was old Linden peeping at us from his hiding-place behind the screen. The look of amazed perplexity which was on his big red face struck me with such a keen sense of the incongruous that it was all I could do to keep from laughter. Apparently the sight of us did nothing to lighten the fog which was in his brain, for he stammered out in what was possibly intended for a whisper. Is she mad? The whisper, if it was meant for a whisper, was more than sufficiently audible to catch his daughter's ears. She started, raised her head, sprang to her feet, turned, and saw her father. Papa! Immediately her sire was seized with an access of stuttering. What the devil's the meaning of this? Her utterance was clear enough. I fancy her parent found it almost painfully clear. Rather, it is for me to ask, what is the meaning of this? Is it possible that, all the time, you have actually been concealed behind that screen? Unless I am mistaken, the old gentleman cowered before the directness of his daughter's gaze, and endeavored to conceal the fact by an explosion of passion. Don't you speak to me like that, you undutiful girl. I'm your father. You certainly are my father, though I was unaware until now that my father was capable of playing the part of eavesdropper. Rage rendered him speechless, or, at any rate, he chose to let us believe that that was the determining cause of his continuing silent. So Marjorie turned to me, and, on the whole, I had rather she had not. Her manner was very different from what it had been just now. It was more than civil, it was freezing. Am I to understand, Mr. Atherton, that this has been done with your cognizance? That while you suffered me to pour out my heart to you unchecked, you were aware, all the time, that there was a listener behind the screen? I became keenly aware, on a sudden, that I had borne my share in playing her a very shabby trick. I should have liked to throw old Linden through the window. The thing was not of my contriving. Had I had the opportunity, I would have compelled Mr. Linden to face you when you came in, but your distress caused me to lose my balance, and you will do me the justice to remember that I endeavored to induce you to come with me into another room. But I do not seem to remember your hinting at there being any particular reason why I should have gone. You never gave me a chance. Sydney, I had not thought you would have played me such a trick. When she said that, in such a tone, the woman whom I loved, I could have hammered my head against the wall. The hound I was to have treated her so scurvily. Perceiving I was crushed, she turned again to face her father, cool, calm, stately. She was, on a sudden, once more, the Marjorie with whom I was familiar. The demeanor of parent and child was in striking contrast. If appearances went for aught, the odds were heavy that in any encounter which might be coming, the senior would suffer. I hope, Papa, that you are going to tell me that there has been some curious mistake, and that nothing was farther from your intention than to listen at a keyhole. What would you have thought and said if I had attempted to play the spy on you? And I have always understood that men were so particular on points of honor. Old Linden was still hardly fit to do much else than splutter, certainly not qualified to chop phrases with this sharp-tongued maiden. "Don't talk to me like that, girl. I believe you're stark mad." He turned to me. "What was that tomfoolery she was talking to you about?" "To what do you allude?" "About a rubbishing Beetle, and goodness alone knows what, diseased and morbid imagination, reared on the literature of the gutter. I never thought that a child of mine could have sunk to such a depth. Now, Atherton, I ask you to tell me frankly, what do you think of a child who behaves as she has done? Who takes a nameless vagabond into the house and conceals his presence from her father? And mark the sequel. Even the vagabond warns her against the rascal Lessingham. Now, Atherton, tell me what you think of a girl who behaves like that." I shrugged my shoulders. I know very well what you do think of her. Don't be afraid to say it out because she's present. No, Sidney, don't be afraid. I saw that her eyes were dancing. In a manner of speaking, her looks brightened under the sunshine of her father's displeasure. Let's hear what you think of her as a man of the world. Pray, Sidney, do. What you feel for her in your heart of hearts. Yes, Sidney, what do you feel for me in your heart of hearts? The baggage beamed with heartless sweetness. She was making a mock of me. Her father turned as if he would have rent her. "Don't you speak until you're spoken to. Atherton, I hope I'm not deceived in you. I hope you're the man I took you for, that you're willing and ready to play the part of an honest friend to this misguided simpleton. This is not the time for mincing words. It's the time for candid speech. Tell this weak-minded young woman right out whether this man Lessingham is or is not a damned scoundrel. Papa, do you really think that Sidney's opinion or your opinion is likely to alter facts? Do you hear, Atherton? Tell this wretched girl the truth. My dear Mr. Linden, I have already told you that I know nothing either for or against Mr. Lessingham except what is known to all the world." "Exactly, and all the world knows him to be a miserable adventurer who is scheming to entrap my daughter. I am bound to say, since you press me, that your language appears to me to be unnecessarily strong. Atherton, I'm ashamed of you. You see, Sidney, even Papa is ashamed of you. Now you are outside the pale. My dear Papa, if you will allow me to speak, I will tell you what I know to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That Mr. Lessingham is a man with great gifts goes without saying. Permit me, Papa. He is a man of genius. He is a man of honor. He is a man of the loftiest ambitions, of the highest aims. He has dedicated his whole life to the improvement of the conditions amidst which the less fortunate of his fellow countrymen are at present compelled to exist. That seems to me to be an object well worth having. He has asked me to share his life work, and I have told him that I will. When and where and how he wants me to, and I will. I do not suppose his life has been free from peccadilloes. I have no delusion on the point. What man's life has? Who among men can claim to be without sin? Even the members of our highest families sometimes hide behind screens. But I know that he is, at least, as good a man as I ever met. I am persuaded that I shall never meet a better, and I thank God that I have found favor in his eyes. Goodbye, Sidney. I suppose I shall see you again, Papa." With the merest inclination of her head to both of us, she straightway left the room. Linden would have stopped her. "Stay, you, he stuttered. But I caught him by the arm. "If you will be advised by me, you will let her go. No good purpose will be served by a multiplication of words. Atherton, I'm disappointed in you. You haven't behaved as I expected. I haven't received from you the assistance which I looked for. My dear Linden, it seems to me that your method of diverting the young lady from the path which she has set herself to tread is calculated to send her furiously along it. Confound the women! Confound the women! I don't mind telling you, in confidence, that at times her mother was the devil, and I'll be hanged if her daughter isn't worse. What was the tomfoolery she was talking to you about? Is she mad? No, I don't think she's mad. I never heard such stuff. It made my blood run cold to hear her. What's the matter with the girl? Well, you must excuse my saying that I don't fancy you quite understand women. I don't, and I don't want to either. I hesitated, then resolved on a taradiddle in Marjorie's interest. Marjorie is high-strung, extremely sensitive. Her imagination is quickly aflame. Perhaps last night you drove her as far as was safe. You heard for yourself how, in consequence, she suffered. You don't want people to say you have driven her into a lunatic asylum. Good heavens, no. I'll send for the doctor directly I get home. I'll have the best opinion in town. You'll do nothing of the kind. You'll only make her worse. What you have to do is to be patient with her and let her have peace. As for this affair of Lessingham's, I have a suspicion that it may not be all such plain sailing as she supposes. What do you mean? I mean nothing. I only wish you to understand that until you hear from me again, you had better let matters slide. Give the girl her head. Give the girl her head? Haven't I? I've given the girl her head all her life. He looked at his watch. Why, the day's half gone. He began scurrying towards the front door, I following at his heels. I've got a committee meeting on at the club. Most important. For weeks they've been giving us the worst food you ever tasted in your life, played havoc with my digestion, and I'm going to tell them if things aren't changed, they'll have to pay my doctor's bills. As for that man, Lessingham. As he spoke, he himself opened the hall door, and there, standing on the step, was that man Lessingham himself. Linden was a picture. The apostle was as cool as a cucumber. He held out his hand. "Good morning, Mr. Linden. What delightful weather we are having." Linden put his hand behind his back and behaved as stupidly as he very well could have done. "You will understand, Mr. Lessingham, that in future I don't know you, and that I shall decline to recognize you anywhere, and that what I say applies equally to any member of my family." With his hat very much on the back of his head, he went down the steps like an inflated turkey-cock.